Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cultivate E.D.H podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Cam, and today we got our fifth and final deck in the Commander 2020 review series. We got Enhanced Evolution headed by Otrimi the Ever Playful. So we're going to dive right in. 3 and Assault type black, green blue for a 6/6 legendary creature Nightmare Beast. It has Mutate, 1 in Assault Trample. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, return target creature card with Mutate from your graveyard to your hand. So, Mutate is a mechanic new with the Ikoria set that basically means that if I have a creature on the battlefield already, I can play a creature from my hand, or in this case, Otrimi from the command zone. I can play that card for its mutate cost and put it on top or under. Now, if I put it under, it gains all of the top creature now gains all of the abilities from underneath the cards underneath it, and then the top card is the power and toughness, and that's it. So everything underneath, all of the text goes up to the top creature, and the top creature just maintains its power and toughness. With that said, Aaron Otrimi, what do you think when you see it?
So when I first saw this card, I was pretty excited. I think Mutate is a really unique new mechanic that we have. Being able to kind of put non-human cards together and just stack up and make a creature with a real long text box is a really interesting and kind of very new way to play. I think that it's going to create a lot of interesting decks, and I hope to see more of the mutate ability in the future, and not just what we get out of uh, Commander 2020 and Ikoria.
All right, let's shift our focus a little bit to the other commanders in this product to kind of gauge whether or not we think Otrimi might be the best head of this deck. We'll start with the partner commanders, Ukima the Stalking Shadow and Sazur Ruthless Stalker. Ukima Stalking Shadow, 1 in a themire, blue-black for a 2/2 Whale Wolf, partner with Sazar. Ukima Stalking Shadow cannot be blocked, and when Ukima leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player and you gain X life where X is its power. And Sazur reads 3 and a green for a 3/3 human warrior, partner with Ukima Stalking Shadow. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature.
So just looking at this, off the top, I think that these are okay commanders, but I don't know that they're the best mutate commanders. While Ukima Stalking Shadow is very good, I think Sazur was an interesting choice here because
He's a
mutate
human,
ability.
right? He's a human, right?
Yeah,
You can't mutate onto him.
yeah. Which I would think you wouldn't want to put a human in this deck like at all. Really, I mean, you always want to be mutating. So to put a human in here and even make it one of the possible commanders was an interesting choice that I don't know I necessarily agree with. I understand that with, all these partner commanders, it's supposed to be some big creature and the person who has like tamed it or whatever, being kind of the theme of Ikoria. I get that, but still having a human in this deck is not the best idea in my
It
opinion.
almost seems to serve more as like an enchantment type thing, where it's not like you're not meant to mutate on it, it's just meant to help you with the mutate mechanic as a whole, where you stack like 3 creatures on top of each other. Maybe you've got, let's say, like a 12/12 creature going, and then you get in there for that combat damage, and then you get to make it bigger by 1, so now you've got a 13/13. And I think that's really what it's meant to be. But let's move to the next one just to kind of see if maybe the next one is better. And the next one we have Sexara the Exemplary, 1 in Assault type black, green blue for a 2/3 Nightmare Hydra, Death Touch. Tap, add 2 mana of any one color. Whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token and then put X +1/+1 counters on it. And I don't think this card is maybe your commander either.
It's funny. I I mostly agree with you, but there's so many cards in this deck with X in their mana cost. I mean, I think it's kind of funny they have almost pointed this towards like a Hydra sub theme, and I could I could easily see you kind of shifting this deck over into more of a Hydra deck with a little bit of mutate on there to maybe give your Hydras a little bit of an extra boost. But I do agree that this is not going to be your commander either. I think that Otrimi is definitely meant to pilot. They're meant to lead this deck.
I think Sexara is the perfect example of how some of these decks really ride this hard line between being A or B, A being the mutate, or Sexara in this case, really riding that line hard between being like X spell tribal, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that, overall, I like these legendary creatures that they've put in here. I think that it, you could see it piloting this deck, but I don't know that it would be the most like proficient that you could be. I think Otrimi, because you get like you're getting your mutate stuff back, is going to be so helpful, especially with you can put it. It doesn't put it on the battlefield, which is really nice because you really want that mutate stuff in your hand so you can combine them and start making you know big long text box creatures.
I would agree 100% because Otrimi, like the mutate mechanic, really lends itself to the I'm putting all of my eggs in one basket strategy. Now, granted, you can play multiple creatures and then mutate on top of those creatures separately and try to build up maybe your forces in a little different kind of way instead of just putting everything on one and trying to make it the biggest thing. I really think Otrimi lends itself to the yes, I'm putting all of my eggs in one basket, but I'm probably not going to get as punished for it as I probably should if I were running Ukima and Sazzer or Zaxara.
Interestingly enough, though, putting your eggs in one basket, there is a very easy way to kind of combat this, and it's a really interesting thing with mutate. If you have a stack of creatures, let's say I've got 3 creatures that are all mutated together. If I blink that creature, it does count as one creature. But when I go to blink it, it actually, as it leaves the battlefield, those will all separate and come down as separate creatures. So let's say you have someone, and blue does have a good chunk of blink spells that you'd be able to use here. If let's say I had Boneyard, Microdex, Otrimi, and Trumpeting Gnar. If I have those 3 creatures all stacked up, and someone goes to swing at me with 3 creatures, well, right now I only have 1 blocker. I can, in response, blink that stack of creatures, and then they separate, and now I have 3 blockers. And I think that that's a really fun mechanic that you could use to kind of combat trick your way around this deck.
And it also, like you said, it really helps kind of mitigate the whole, well, you might be destroying my one creature, but in response, I'll blink it. And now I have a bunch of separate creatures, but it's also, I have now more targets to mutate, and I kind of get to pick and choose maybe where I go with it instead of just, well, I've already started this one creature. I might as well just keep stacking cards on top of it.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any blink spells in here starting off, so that would be something that you guys would have to add to your deck, but still a really interesting path that you could take with this deck.
All right, let's highlight some good mutate cards now, because we're not really going to include them in the new card section, despite them being mainly from the main Ikoria set. There's not that many that are actually new, not in the Ikoria set. Some of them and a lot of them have actually been transferred over. We're just going to highlight a couple real quick. We'll start it off with Migratory Greathorn, 3 and a green for a 3/4 beast. Mutate for 2 and a green. Whenever this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land, put it on your battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So it's Rampant Growth. You get to Rampant Growth whenever this thing mutates.
I think that that's a really good way to ramp this deck up, especially because it does want to have X spells being cast, so you're going to need a lot of extra mana. You cast that on turn 3 even with the mutate. Maybe you get a smaller creature out and just put that on there, and now you have a really easy way to ramp. You just keep stacking up onto this Migratory Greathorn or whatever's above or beneath it, and every time you get that, you're going to continue to get mana. And I think that like that's a really good repeatable ramp because you don't have to tap it or anything like that. It's just every time you make this creature better, you also get some extra land along with it.
So it's basically like adding the text of every time I play a creature with mutate, I basically get to go search for a land. I get to ramp. It just makes it all that much, all the more better that. So not only am I getting this card that is probably going to say when this creature mutates, so when I mutate it onto this stack of creatures, I'm going to get the card that I just played, its Mutate Trigger. Let's, for example, we'll say the next card that we're going to highlight, Dreamtail Huron. I mutate Dreamtail Huron for 3 and a blue onto my Migratory Greathorn. Now I get to ramp and draw a card. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, I mean, being able to, you you stack Migratory Greathorn, then Dreamtail Heron. You stack maybe the next card on here, Souvenir Snatcher, and you start going wild. And Snatcher reads, mutate for 5 and a blue. When this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact.
I'm taking all your soul rings. Give me them.
Like, I think that the thing with mutate is if you let the mutate deck across from you get off the ground and get a stack of 3 or 4 creatures, they're gonna just start outvaluing you so much that you're not gonna be able to stop them. They'll have so many cards in hand, so much extra mana. I mean, being able to, gain control of some artifacts, whatever it may be, that's where mutate kind of shines. It wants to outvalue the other decks and keep its engine going while amassing this, either it be one big creature or a couple kind of medium-sized creatures, whatever it may be. That it wants to get those engines going and just continue to outvalue as you get more creatures.
I think it's also super notable the fact that one of the saving graces that we kind of highlighted it, it's where it's a blink card where I can protect my creature by basically splitting it up and taking all of the creature cards and setting them out individually again. They're all separate creatures now. That your opponents also can do that. So if you try to like make this big monster and make it like this 2020 and then you go into attacks and you make it like so it can't block or so that it can't be blocked and they just kind of blink it, all of your stuff goes away, comes back in untapped and separated. It's this really delicate balance that I also think is really intriguing.
Yeah, and sometimes these mutate costs give it a really good cost reduction. Like for the next card on here, Tossed Demolisher, it's 4 and 2 green, a beast. It has trample 6/6, and whenever this creature mutates, destroy target non-creature permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token, so it's beast within. But its mutate is 3 and a green, so you get 2 mana reduction if you mutate it. So
And you
that's
get
some
Beast
really good
Within on
value.
top of that.
Yeah, that is some really good value for a lot of these creatures. Is some of them are a increase mana cost, but a lot of them are mana cost
Reduced or like
reductions.
the same. Like the next one we can highlight, Boneyard Lurker, it's the same mana cost, except it's actually kind of better in a way because it's 2 black and a green for the normal mana cost, but then the mutate is 2 Golgari hybrid. So you can like it really kind of helps you with like maybe if you're mana screwed for I don't know, green and you only have like 2 black sources, well then cool, I can mutate this out. And then it also has a really good ability when this creature mutates, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So you're getting back maybe a mutate creature that someone destroyed before you got to mutate Boneyard Lurker.
Yeah, but maybe you get your mutate creature to ramp you. Maybe you bring back Migratory Greatheart and go for that green mana that you so desperately need. And that's really where mutate's going to shine. It just, no matter what it's doing, as long as you have a creature on the battlefield, you can continue to mutate and get value from the mutate.
All right, let's move on to our actual new cards that don't have mutate but are in this deck new to the Commander 2020 product. We'll start it off with Capricopian. X and a green for a 0/0 Goat Hydra. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Pay 2, put a +1/+1 counter on Capricopian, then you may reselect which player Capricopian is attacking. Only the player Capricopian is attacking may activate this ability, and only during the declare attacker step. So it's this weird, like, I'm going to pass around the attacker type thing, and every time I pass it around, it gets bigger.
Yeah, I think that this card's gonna be really fun, and something that I thought of initially when I saw this card. You know who would love this? Our boys from Unstable Crossbreed Labs. This screams kind of the Crossbreed Labs theme that we saw then, and I think that's really funny with the mutate thing. The mutate ability really kind of is like, to me, is almost silver border, but
I
we
definitely don't think you want to mutate this because, well, and maybe you do. Maybe you want to put this on. Maybe you want to mutate on top of this so that you can use it more as a political tool, your big creature that you're creating. That way it's like, well, I'm going to attack you, but you can always pay 2 mana to redirect it at player 3 or player C.
yeah, it definitely is a political tool because you go to swing it at somebody, and if they pay 2, well, now I don't the person who's gonna get attacked might not necessarily be mad at you. They're gonna be a little bit more mad at the person who has paid the 2 to hit somebody else, and
And then they
especially if
could
this
always
is
pay the 2 and then point it back at them. And then you could get into this war where people are using up all their mana, which is kind of what you want.
yeah, it's really kind of a interesting way to not only get people to kind of pit them against one another, but to also get them to waste their mana. You know, maybe you're playing against a blue control deck and you've got this thing up to be like a 10/10 or something like that. You turn it sideways at them. Well, they spend their 2 extra mana to get it to go elsewhere. Well, now you can play whatever you want to play next with, a little more, being a little more at ease because you don't think it'll be countered now.
All right, let's move on down the list. We think Capricopian's pretty good. We'll wait to see. The jury's still out kind of on that. This next card, I don't think it's as good. I think it's probably going to be one of the lower tier cards of the new cards from this set. It's Boneyard Drax, 2 and a black for a star. Boneyard Drax's power and toughness are each equal to the number of other creature cards in your graveyard. Scavenge 4 and a black. Scavenge reads 4 and a black, exile this card from your graveyard, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to this card's power on target creature, scavenge only as a sorcery. I don't think it's that good. You definitely don't want to draw this in the early turns.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Cameron. I think that this card is really underpowered for what this deck wants to do. Having Otrimi as the commander and having it want to take things out of the graveyard, you're really not going to get a lot of use out of Boneyard Drax because hopefully Otrimi's doing the work and making sure that your graveyard's empty. So at that point, this makes this card kind of null and void, and I think that this would be probably one of the first cards that I take out of this deck, to be honest.
I mean, it's not to say that it's entirely bad because obviously there is the scavenge ability that you can pay 5 mana to then pump something later, but that's really all you're doing. I'm not really looking to play that because I mean, if I play this on turn 3, more than likely I don't have anything in my graveyard and it just dies. But then I guess maybe you could just pay 3 mana to put it into your graveyard and kind of save it for later. I just don't think that that's a reliable option. So I think this is, like you said, probably, if not cut number 1, easily in the top 3 first cards that are going to come out of this deck. This next card, though, however, I definitely think is better and is just kind of weird. I don't think I've seen anything like this. It's Tidal Barracuda for 3 and a blue, 3/4 fish. Any player may cast spells as though they had flash. Your opponents can't cast spells on your turn. So you kind of make your opponents fight amongst each other.
Yeah, I honestly think that this could be going in group hug a little bit because it has that group hug, but also has that little bit of pillow fort that, when group hug tries to protect itself, of your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, but also everyone's happy with you because they can cast spells as though they had flash. Really interesting mechanic, kind of making that it would definitely make games go faster. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, turning everybody's sorcery speed removal into instant speed removal. I mean, it will without a doubt probably make games go faster.
I I think that overall, I don't know that this is the best deck for this card, but with the mutate ability, you just want to kind of get some real long text boxes that can help you out, and I do think that this does that. But I think eventually it'll find itself a better home.
This next card though, this card is so busted. This next card is one of the cards in the free cycle of the free spells that we've seen in all the other decks. This is the final one, the mono black one, Deadly Rollick, 3 and a black for an instant. If you control a commander, you can cast it for free. Just straight up exile target creature. A free exile spell. This card's nuts.
Yeah, this is exactly what we wanted to see from our last card in the free cycle. Being able to just straight up exile target creature, and it doesn't even have any extra text of like exile target non-human, that being kind of the theme of mutate. It's just straight up exile a creature. And that is really what this deck is wanting to do. Or
This
not
this
what it
card is
wants to do,
gonna
but
get me so many times. I'm gonna get got by this card.
yeah. it- this card is really gonna kind of catch people by surprise. You're going in for lethal with commander damage, and but their commander is still up. Maybe it's tapped down, whatever it is going on in your game, and just boom, exile, it's gone. Maybe you're swinging in with your Blightsteel Colossus. Not afraid because it's got the indestructible. Boom, it's gone, and they're tapped down, so you didn't even really see it coming. This card is gonna start jumping up in price really quickly, and B, it's going to start running rampant in the commander community.
I totally agree. This cycle is just so absurdly powerful. Even the one that isn't the most powerful, the green fog one that we looked at in the Cathril deck, it's a free spell is a free spell, and it's basically a free include because the criteria for you to cast it for free is so insanely easy to meet.
Yeah, being able to, all it says is just, do you have your commander, or do you have a commander? And maybe you're playing theft, and you say, well, I don't necessarily have my commander, but I control someone else's. And you're still going to get that for free, and that is just so really
It's
good
just
value.
so good. Such great value that we've seen from not just this card, but from the entire free cycle. Now, Aaron, I want to get your opinion on this next card. We'll move on from Deadly Rollo because, as we all can tell, it's a pretty good card. So we'll move on to Dredge the Mire for 3 and a black sorcery. Each opponent chooses a creature card in their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Aaron, give me your first take on this card.
I mean, any way you put it, three creatures is three creatures, whether you use them for chump blockers, you throw them into a sack outlet, whatever it is, you're still going to get some kind of value from this card. The only way you don't is if you play it and only like one player has creatures in their graveyard. But I think that at the time of you casting this, there's no way that they don't. The only like big counter to this, to kind of give it less value, is if they start handing you humans, because then you can't mutate onto them. But still, I mean, you're gonna have free blockers, and that's still good value.
Well, I feel like there's some situations where this basically reads 4 mana sorcery, make 3 tokens. And then you're just gonna, like you said, pitch them to some sacrifice outlet, sacrifice them, I don't know, do something with them where you really don't care. It's just that you're really in need of something to pitch to a sacrifice outlet if you're in that kind of deck. Maybe like an Ashnod's Altar or a Viscera Seer so you can scry or make mana. But I think maybe the best case scenario is you get something really good. You might get, I don't know, maybe you might just get something that ramps you. Who knows? I'm kind of medium on this card. It's super situational.
Yeah, and the part where it says and each opponent chooses a creature makes it a little, harder for you to get good value out of it, because a lot of times people will have, lots of different creatures in their graveyard, and obviously they're not going to be handing you their big, splashy creature with a real long text box because they know you're just going to mutate onto it and start making a even bigger and scarier creature. So they want to give you something. I think even if they hand you like a Sakura tribe elder or something like that, something that'll ramp you, they'd still rather do that than give you something that is gonna be either have a big power and toughness or has long lots of keywords text box, something that could give one of your mutate creatures a real big power boost.
Just kind of medium on Dredge the Mire. I think it definitely has its chance to shine, but aside from that, I think it's just okay. We'll move on to the next card. Migration Path, 3 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library, cycling 2. So it's a better explosive vegetation because you can just cycle it when you don't need it to draw a card.
Yeah, I think that we're just going to start seeing this switched out for any explosive vegetations that people might have.
I mean, it's just strictly better.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the amount of times I've got caught in the late game. Like, come on, I need something to dig me out of this hole, and it's like explosive vegetation. It's like, well, crap.
I don't have a lot to say on this card. I think that ramp is always ramp, and I do expect this card to start being used pretty frequently. The next card, though, I'm pretty interested about. Mana Escape Refractor. It's a 3-mana artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. It has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield. And you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to pay the activation costs of Mana Escape Refractor's abilities. What do you think, Cameron?
I can't wait to strip bind people with this. I can't wait to play my strip binds and then play my Manascape Refractor, and it says, "Oh, this artifact now has tap, destroy target land." Awesome, bam. Get rid of your I don't know, get rid of your tri land, handicap you on your mana a little bit.
Yeah, I think that this card has some great potential. I think that people are going to really try to abuse this.
It seems
And
abusable, right? Like it seems like there's got to be something I can do with this card that is just really abusable.
I am happy that it is just activated abilities, because if it said that it had all abilities, then if someone plays Dark Depths, you could just play this for 3 mana and it wouldn't come in with any ice counters. And then
Congratulations,
you
make your own 2020.
yeah. So I think that was really smart on the side of Wizards to not just make this a 3 mana get to use somebody else's Dark Depths, but
I don't see
still,
Dark Depths in that in Commander that much, but I can still
yeah,
understand. I can still understand the point where obviously you wouldn't want that.
yeah. I have seen it at least once before, and it is pretty scary. So, but still, having all activated abilities is going to be great. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. So,
All right, we'll move on down to our reprint category. Starting off with Beast Whisperer. We got 2 green green for a 2/3 elf druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Straight good value.
yep. And because Mutate doesn't let them enter the battlefield, this was the perfect card to include, because it's whenever you cast a creature spell, and those mutates are still going to count as creature spells. So, there's really good value.
Another card that I never would have thought to put in this deck, but is absolutely genius to put in this deck, is our next reprint, Silent Arbiter for 4 mana artifact creature 1/5. No more than one creature may attack each combat. No more than one creature may block each combat. Because this plays perfectly into the hand of sweet. You can only block with one creature, and ideally, I'm going to give my big mutate creature trample. So my big creature is going to trample right over yours, and I'm going to deal you some damage. Never would have thought to put this card in this deck. I'm so glad that they thought of it though, because it's really good include.
This is why we pay Wizards the big bucks, because they remember to include cards like this, and this is exactly what Mutate wants to do. It wants to make one big creature that they're going to be turning sideways with, and hopefully there's not a whole lot you can do about it because I got a big creature.
And this card really like helps kind of shore up the I'm putting all of my eggs in one basket thing that we've been talking about, where you know I'm making this one big creature, and if somebody destroys it, I'm gonna get blown out. This kind of helps narrow the path, as it were, for you to get in there and get some damage in with your big creature before somebody deals with it.
That's one of the things that I found really interesting with Mutate is you can put all your eggs in one basket, and that makes it that kind of handicaps it a little bit. But having the ability to you could blink that creature, which you could do to any creature that's going to be removed, but having that option to not only save it, but it also separates, and now your eggs are no longer in one basket. I really think that that is going to be a vital include into this deck.
Yeah, kind of like a mechanism. Like you probably want to put maybe a blink card, maybe two in here that will allow you to just save your creature straight up. I would recommend probably Evacuation, which is 3 blue for an instant return all creatures to their owner's hands, because then it's not just going away from the battlefield, coming back and separating. Now all of them come back to your hand and you can recast them for their mutate costs. That's probably the one that I highly recommend the most, but it's still the rules that are behind mutate that allow it to do that are just phenomenal. And we'll move on to the next card because I think now this next card gets up to like $2 to $3, and it's only because you can cast it as a divination and a creature. It's Muldrifter, 4 and a blue for a 2/2 flying. When it comes into play to draw 2 cards, you can invoke it for 2 and a blue, which means it comes into play, and then you have to immediately sacrifice it, but you still get to draw those 2 cards. It's really good value, and I never understand why it gets up there to like $2 to $3. Is it just because it's good?
I think it's just because it's straight value. I mean, you can pay 3 mana to draw 2 cards, and can you, before it gets sacrificed, can you send it into a sack outlet?
I don't believe you can, because I think you cast it for its evoke cost. It enters the battlefield, and upon resolution of the evoke, you have to sacrifice it.
Okay, that's what I thought. But it also it's a creature spell still. So if someone has a card that says counter target non-creature spell, well, they're not going to be able to counter this. But I don't know that anyone would. You're just drawing 2 cards, which is still good value, but I don't know that I see someone countering this because there are definitely worse things that you could be doing. But still, it's good value, and
It gives whatever you're mutating. You're obviously putting this on the bottom, and then whatever is on top gains flying, and that's not nothing.
yeah,
It's kind of like our next card, which is another card from this same cycle. It's Shriekmaw. It's the kind of like the black version of Muldrifter. It's 4 and a black for a 3/2 elemental. Has fear. Fear is this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and/or black creatures. And when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-black creature, and you get to evoke it for 1 and a black. So you're basically hard casting this for 5, blowing up a non-black creature, and then giving something fear. Giving basically whatever you're going to put on top of this, it's going to have fear. So it's going to make it obviously harder to block, which is what you want.
yeah. I honestly see you putting Otrimi on top of this because giving that evasion to Otrimi, and he has the ability of whenever it deals combat damage to a player, return target creature card with mutate from your graveyard to your hand. I think you play Shriekmaw, you put Otrimi on top of it, and then you have not only the fear, but if they do have a black creature or an artifact creature, he still will have trample, and that's that extra evasion that you need to start putting things back into your hand.
Another reason that we pay wizards the big bucks to think of things that we wouldn't think of before. Never even thought of this. The Undying and Persist mechanic, which leads us to our next card, which is Vorapede. 2 green, green, green for a 5/4 insect. Vigilance, Trample, and has Undying. So now here's the rules interaction with Undying and a Mutate. So if I put Vorapede on the bottom, and it gives whatever creature is on top Undying, the Mutate creature is one creature. So if it has Undying or Persist, which is Undying, if it didn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter, and then Persist is the opposite, where if it didn't have a -1/-1 counter, it comes back with one. They do not leave the battlefield and then come back separated. They do come back as one, which I think is very interesting that like blinking it makes them separate, but if it has Undying, it is considered one creature, so it comes back with the counter on it.
Something that just thinking of with the Undying and Persist, if you can give a if you can give a creature Undying and Persist, if you're able to morph that, although I guess you can't unless they give one of the new Mutate creatures either Undying or Persist. But if they did that and you attached it to, you know, whatever the opposite is, you would never lose that creature because whenever unless someone exiled it. But let's say I had a Mutate creature with Persist. If I put it on a creature with Undying and it dies and it comes back as one, the Undying will trigger and then the Persist will trigger. Then the -1/-1 will cancel out the +1/+1, and the other way around as well.
So I think the best way to go about thinking about this, Aaron, is that there is a card in this deck called Glowstone Recluse. It's 2 and a green for a 2/3 spider with Mutate. And it says whenever this creature mutates, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So if I put, say, a Glenelendra Archmage underneath this, along with the Glowstone Recluse, both of these cards are now underneath whatever creature I've built. If the creature dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. However, if then I can mutate something else onto it, the Glowstone Recluse will trigger and then put the 2 counters on it, and that cancels it out. So then the Undying trigger, if it dies again, would go back on. It's kind of you kind of have to work at it because every time the creature dies and the -1/-1 counter goes on, you would then have to figure out a way to then mutate back onto that creature to get the recluse to put the counters on it, and then therefore cancel out the -1/-1 counter and allow it to die again and then come back.
Yeah, that's gonna be a really good way to keep those creatures around, though. Being able to kind of get rid of that Persist by using the Glowstone Recluse to your advantage of, getting rid of the -1/-1 counter and continuing to keep that creature alive.
Yeah, super interesting like line of play there. Really, really cool. I'm all for it. We'll move on to our next card. We're kind of out of the creatures now. We're into our spells. Animus Awakening, X and a green for a sorcery. Reveal the top X cards of your library. Put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. And it has Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, untap those lands. So this really, this is again on the line of the X-Spell Tribal that this deck is kind of like leaning on.
It definitely, leans into the X-Spell being an X-Spell itself, and it also gives a lot of good ramp. I think that this is a good include, though. I think that being able to ramp in this deck is going to be, I mean, in any of the decks, you're going to want to ramp because they're all 3 colors. I think for 3 and plus color decks, you're wanting to run something like this so that you can really start digging through and trying to get as many different lands out as you can to help with, the different mana costs that you're going to have.
I think one of the things to keep in mind when looking at a spell like Animus Awakening is what direction are you going to take the deck? Because this deck does not include Cultivate. It does include Kodama's Reach, which is basically the same thing. So I really think that if you're going to lean hard into the X-Spell aspect of this deck, then yeah, Animus Awakening is fine. However, if you're going to lean towards the Mutate, I don't necessarily know if you want to sink your mana into Animus Awakening. I think you might want to just play Cultivate and call it good.
I mean, always play a Cultivate, but that's just me. obviously non-biased. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that in the idea of the X spells, this is definitely going to include, but taking this more towards mutate, if you're starting to take out some of those higher, those spells that you're really going to want to pump mana into, you don't need that as much with mutate, so you're just going to need to play a simpler ramp spell.
And see now, I don't think that the X spell is necessarily the case for this next card, which is also an X spell because it draws you cards. It's Mind Spring for X blue blue sorcery draw X cards. Now I think this card, no matter which way you go with it, is fine because I would rather have a late game mana sink that draws me more cards than ramps me because if we're in the late game, I more than likely don't need it.
Yeah, hopefully you're not needing mana in the late game, or else you got some problems that you're gonna have to deal with. But
Should have played the Cultivate. Should have just cut the Animus Awakening to play the Cultivate. Obviously not biased, but you should have just cut the Animus Awakening and play the Cultivate.
yeah, having a mana sink that refills your hand and gets you that gas is what this deck is kind of wanting to do, because you're going to be playing most of your mutate creatures, and if Otrimi is out of targets and you don't have anything else in your graveyard, then you can hopefully pump a bunch of mana into Mind Spring and you draw that gas that you need to close out the game. This is definitely a card to get you towards the end goal.
All right, let's move on to our next card. Crocin Grip. 2 and a green for an instant with split second, which means as long as this spell is on the stack, players cannot play spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So it basically says until Crocin Grip resolves, you basically can't do anything other than activate mana abilities until this spell resolves. This card gets up there in price. Like this card's like $5-6. I'm so glad that they reprinted it. It's one of the cards that we probably not most wanted to see, but it's definitely good reprint value.
Yeah, solid reprint value, and it's really good removal. If this deck has any, because this deck has a couple of pretty good ways to deal with creatures, whether that being to remove the creature with some of the morphing, or not morphing, but mutate that we've seen that lets you destroy creatures, or we've seen some that let you take those creatures, but we haven't seen a lot of artifact or enchantment removals. So this is a really good include with that in mind.
These are the kind of cards that get played in Commander all the time that we should be seeing reprinted in almost every product for Commander. This card should be just as ubiquitous as Chaos Warp because it sees play in almost every single green deck that's not like a hardcore based creature green deck. So really solid include in here, but I still think that it should be included in more Commander product.
For sure. Speaking of things that we might not have 100% expected to see, this next card, I don't know if I would have included it, like just thinking about the mutate ability, but seeing it here in this deck, I think it's a fantastic include. That's Propaganda for 2 and a blue enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controllers pay 2 colorless mana for each creature he or she controls that's attacking you. So, you're probably this helps when you're putting all your eggs in one basket. I mean, you make a big creature, a big, long paragraph text box splashy creature, you turn it sideways. Well, now you don't have a blocker, and maybe you don't have that blink spell to separate it or anything like that. So you play the Propaganda and kind of play towards that pillow for a little bit, so that while your creatures are out punch and face, you aren't getting that that return damage of on the crackback.
It definitely seems like there are cards in this deck, like we said before, Silent Arbiter and Propaganda are the two biggest examples of this, that this deck has almost a slight pillow fort aspect to it because of the whole, I'm putting all of my eggs in this one basket and really hoping that nobody destroys it. And Propaganda is a really good insurance policy that if somebody does destroy that basket with all my eggs in it, that it's going to make it harder for them to then come at me on the crackback. regardless of how the creature died. That maybe it was attacking and it died, or maybe somebody you declared attackers and then they blew it up, or whatever the case may be. Just a really solid reprint, and this card also gets up there in value until it sees reprint in. I don't know, usually we see it in some ancillary auxiliary product sometime throughout the year, at least once, but it always maintains around like $5 to price tag.
I think that this deck overall, from what we've seen so far, is kind of almost wanting to lean, like, if let's say you took out the X spells and you really just kept it towards mutate, you might see kind of a sub pillow fort type theme to come with this. You know, maybe you start turning it more that way so that you can make one big creature, you can put all your eggs in one basket, and you can do exactly what this propaganda wants to do and kind of protect yourself so you don't get hurt on the crackback.
All right, let's take a look at our last reprint that is not a land. It's our Planeswalker reprint, Nissa, Steward of Elements, X green blue for an X loyalty Planeswalker, +2 scry 2, 0. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card or a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, Steward of Elements, you may put that card onto the battlefield. -6 untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until the end of the turn. They're still lands. I think it's just really solid to include, maybe even just play on turn 3 for 3 mana and then just +2 scry 2. Out of the box, it's certainly not bad.
Yeah, I think that out of all the planeswalkers we've seen, this is one of the better ones to include into this deck.
I definitely think that Nissa, Steward of Elements, and Chandra Flamecaller are probably the 2 planeswalkers out of the 5 that we've seen that are the best reprints from Commander 2020, planeswalker wise.
Overall, the planeswalker reprints that we got were decent. I do think some of them could have been maybe a little bit different. Maybe a couple of different choices could have been made, but overall, not bad. I think that this card is probably going to be one of the few that stays in their deck. It, it's kind of hard to say for me personally because I haven't played the deck yet. But the functionality for this card, especially for the X spells route, this helps that quite a bit.
Definitely a keep if you're going towards the X spells side of this deck and you're going to lean away from the mutate. Definitely, I'm definitely keeping Nissa Steward of Elements in the X spell tribal deck that I'm hypothetically building of Otrimi, if that's the way I'm going to lean. All right, let's take a look at our land reprints. We got Sunken Hollow, Darkwater Catacombs, and Simic Growth Chamber. Again, just solid land reprints. These are not Guildgate mana bases. These are full-fledged, functioning tricolor mana bases, and I think these 3 really cement that. I don't know. I don't know if we can praise the land base in these precons enough because they're so much better than what we've seen in previous products.
That was exactly what I was thinking. The amount of good stuff that we've seen from these lands has just been fantastic. So much better than what we've gotten in the past. I I mean, I totally agree. You can't praise Wizards enough for this.
Very high functioning mana bases for a pre-constructed product. I can take this deck and I can change all the other cards in it and not change the mana base, and I still have a functioning Sultai mana base. And that's the main thing that we should focus on here, is that they did such a good job of designing the mana base to where it's yes, it is a bunch of tap lands. These are not shocks. These are not fetches. These are not original dual lands. It's not the most powerful, but for a pre-constructed product that you can buy for $34.99, it's just solid. It's just a solid mana base.
It makes it even easier when you go to build your next deck. Maybe you take this apart, and now you have such a good chunk of lands that you can put into your next build. Really makes it so much easier for new players to continue doing what they love and building new decks.
I mean, I could take all the cards out of this and say I want to build a different Sultai deck and just take the mana base from this and go build another Sultai deck, and I'd more than likely be fine.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I've enjoyed the mana base that we've seen the most is because of the ability that it gives you the ability to continue to build after you've maybe taken apart this deck in the future.
Exactly. All right, let's round out our episode here with the first segment of our ending. We'll give it a grade. Aaron, give it a grade.
I'd say a solid B plus. I think that Mutate on its own is going to see a little bit of trouble, but this deck is really kind of shows people the direction that it wants to take. But I do think that you're going to want to take probably a lot of these X spells out of here. I know it has potential for sure, but it also makes it a little bit hard because you have to mana sink into these X spells to make it big. Then you have to go later and then mutate onto it, where you really want to send, something out and then hopefully try to mutate on the same turn. And that's where I think this deck kind of falters a little bit, but still solid synergy and a lot of really good cards and reprints in here that get this deck almost there.
I'm right there with you with a B. I think that the mutate mechanic, because this is the set mechanic from Ikoria, I think that definitely hurts this product because there's a lot of stuff that they really can't include. They really have to draw heavily from the standard set release to make this deck function because that's where the majority of the cards that they're printing are coming from with the mutate mechanic. They're coming from the standard set, and I think that kind of handicaps the deck in a way. In a way, but overall I still think that the deck has good synergy, and since it's being released right alongside Ikoria, it's not like it's being released in September or October later in the year when Ikoria has been released all the way back in releases in May now because of the COVID-19 crisis, but it's not like it's been split up. You're probably going to be able to get your Ikoria singles at the exact same time you'll get your Commander 2020 product. And I think that'll kind of transition us into our pick 3. And I guess I'll start off because I picked 3 cards from the Ikoria main set because I felt like you really didn't want to like bring more cards in from outside this set in because it might hurt the mutate mechanic with it being a quote unquote fragile mechanic in the sense that there's not an unlimited number of cards with mutate. So we'll start it off with Dirge Bat, 2 black for 3/3 bat, mutate 4 black, flash flying. When this creature mutates, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Or creature or planeswalker, my bad. It's just a solid removal spell. And it synergizes with the deck so that you might be able to just take out one of the removal spells that comes in the precon already and substitute in Dirge Bat. It has mutate and it'll synergize with the deck more. We have Gem Razor up next with 3 green, 4/4 beast, mutate 1 green, has reach and trample. Those are 2 keywords that are going to really contribute to the overall power of the monster you're building. And whenever it mutates, destroy target artifact or enchantment opponent controls. So it Reclamation Sages something every time you mutate it. It's like recurring Reclamation Sage, getting that enter the battlefield effect every time. It's just good. And then I kind of swung for the fences on the last one with Emergent Ultimatum. It's the Sultai Ultimatum black, green, blue, sorcery. Search your library for up to 3 monocolor cards with different names and exile them. An opponent chooses one of those cards, shuffle that card into your library. You may cast the other cards without paying their mana costs. So you're really going to go look for maybe the bases of what you want to build your monsters with this card so that you can, I don't know, maybe search out your Eldrazi Titans, put them down on the battlefield, and then start mutating on top of them. Aaron, I'll pass it over to you for your top 3.
So I took mine in a little bit different of a direction. I did kind of look outside of, Ikoria. My first one on here is Rotwolf. For 200 green, infect, whenever this creature deals damage whenever a creature dealt damage by Rotwolf this turn is put into a graveyard, you may draw a card. So it's going to give you extra card draw, and it's a creature that's going to give Infect. And I think that that is a direction that you could take this deck is start mutating onto Infect creatures, because both black and green are pretty heavy in the Infect category out of all the colors. So being able to start mutating onto Infect creatures is going to be a really powerful mechanic. The next one on here that I said displace for Tuna Blue, it's an instant. Exile up to 2 target creatures you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's controls. So, hopefully you've got a couple of big mutate creatures going, and someone goes to destroy them, you can displace them. Maybe a board wipe comes down, displace, get rid of those 2, and they come back as a big army that you can really use to your advantage as people are starting to rebuild. And the last one on here, we've talked about it a lot before, and this is probably the first time I've mentioned actually putting it into a deck. That's Blightsteel Colossus. It's another Infect creature. I am really strong in the fact or in the belief that I think that Infect could really get this deck to win a little bit more. I think right now as it stands, just having your creatures turn sideways and try to get you a bunch of value might not be enough to close out the game. But having a good solid Infect base might really let you close out the game. So that's my pick 3. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. I really loved going through all these decks. If there's anything you think that we missed, let us know down in the comments below. What are your guys' pick 3? I'm really excited to see these decks as they come out and see what you guys choose to do with them. So we will see you guys next time.